Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 7.16 patch notes and support tier list. So I'm going to start off going over the patch notes, talk about some of the meta changes. I don't think there's been that much change to the meta, honestly, on this patch, aside from discoveries that people have made. And then we'll talk about the support tier list down here. You can find access to the Google Doc I'm going over in the description, as well as timestamps. You can jump around to your favorite parts in case you don't have time to watch all of it. And for the first time on this patch, I haven't done this in the past. I'm going to try to look at each role, at least a few different roles, so not just support. I'm going to do support, then I'm going to do ADC, and then I'm going to continue on do jungle, mid, and top lane, and just talk about the metas, talk about what I think the top 10 picks are for those. So I'll be releasing those videos separately, probably about one per day over the next week or so. And I'm going to try to trim my patch notes a little bit. Usually they're on the long side. I'm going to try to aim for like maybe 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes for the patch notes and the tier list instead of the typical, hour plus videos. So let's go ahead and get in here. So first off, Ornn. I did make an Ornn video. People keep asking about him. He looks like a really cool champion. I'm excited to play him as well, but I'm not going to talk about that here. I'm just going to say go check out my other video. I've got it linked there. In-depth analysis. It's about hour and some change long. Tells you all about Ornn, where I think he's going to fit into the meta, and I think he'll probably be a really good support and sort of a mediocre top and jungler. But do check out that video if you want to know more about that. I will obviously cover him when he gets released next patch in the patch notes proper, once they get all of his set numbers down, and once we know all of the changes that are going to be coming in the next patch. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the patch notes here. I'll talk about Orianna when we get down there. They hotfixed this because they nerfed her too hard on this patch. Basically, what they had was when her ball was in queue to go somewhere, you can actually queue up the W before it gets there, and it will instantly W once it gets there. But apparently that was messing up people's timing with her ultimate as well. So Orianna basically works the exact same way that she's always worked. So that's all there is to that story. All right, Caitlyn. It's a decent nerf to Caitlyn. I don't think it's going to knock her out of competitive. I think she's already, she's good in solo queue, but I think there are other good ones as well. I don't think she's overpowering in solo queue. So I think it's a good change. This is basically going to knock down her wave clear quite a bit. So her Q, that's basically knocking off, like a fourth? Roughly a fourth of her wave clear damage on her Q, so that's pretty significant. And then the Yordle Snap Trap, kind of a slap on the wrist, like early damage matters. Total attack damage is down, the early trap damage is down. So they're just hurting her wave clear, hurting her early game a little bit. I still think she's going to be a strong choice. Like, what makes Caitlyn strong is the ability to place 5 traps and to do it basically on command without like an internal cooldown. Like, there is a small refill time for her traps, but it's obnoxious basically that she can put an entire trap line that can cover up, an entire ramp, or can cover up an entire entrance to a base and things like that. And that's what really makes her powerful, is her siege potential with those traps, and they didn't change that. So I still think she's going to be good for that, but she just may not be as good of a generalist in terms of just doing everything well. She still is pretty good, but last patch they nerfed her her damage over time by taking away quite a bit of her attack speed on her base. And then they also just now nerfed her early game snap trap damage and her ability to wave clear. So I think that I think she's still going to be good, but not quite as good as she was. So I still think she'll be a top 5 for Plat and lower, and maybe a top 3 for Diamond Plus. All right, Fiora. I think this one's actually pretty significant. They gave her back most of her duelist stance. If we look at Fiora, I think this might put her into top 3, top laner again. Like, one of the big things about Fiora is, can she proc those vitals, right? That's what her whole identity is. Can she get these vitals? Because that's what gives the true damage. That's what gives her the healing. That's just her whole identity, right? And they had nerfed this quite a bit. If we look at the history, this is what brought her out of the meta a little bit, although she was still played in competitive some, even after the last nerfs. But the thing that really hurt her is the bonus movement speed from Duelist Dance after you proc a Vital used to be 50%. Went from 20 to 50. And once they nerfed that, that was kind of the nail in the coffin for her. I thought they nerfed a couple of other things about her too. I guess not really that much. Yeah, not really that much until this. And they removed the bonus movement speed while you're in the bonus area, which, I mean, that's important, but this was the big one. So now they've given her back up to 45%. Right, so they've reverted that and they've gone from 15 to 45. So she has 5 less on front, which is still significant, but now she scales to get most of it back at the end. So she's going to have 50% more than she has right now, or that she had on 7.15. She's going to have 50% more. So that's really significant. So I think, and this is a really good meta for her because there's still a ton of tanks running around and she's like the premier tank breaking champion because of the true damage on her Vital. And because of how well she scales with AD. So I think that this is definitely going to put her back, especially for Diamond Plus. I think she's easily a top 5, possibly a top 3 top laner now. I think that she's just extremely good against tanks, and that's what's running around. So expect to see a lot more Fiora. Yeah, she was already pretty good before the tank meta. Now that the tank meta's in full swing, I think she's going to be a lot better. Okay, in terms of Kayn, I think Kayn is mostly irrelevant. There are just better choices a lot of the time. Like the darkened form, the red form is still pretty good, but I don't know. He's okay, you know. He's just like a bruiser, like average kind of jungler. I feel like there are better choices. There are worse choices. He's just like an okay choice. Like I don't think he's top 5, but he could probably be a top 10. There's just not really much to see here other than it destroys lane Kayn, which was already kind of goofy. Because now Deathfire Touch doesn't let him transform, like, and get this super early game power spike. So I think that I mean, it stops lane Kayn, which is already rare. It doesn't do a lot to jungle Kayn, but it's okay. I still think he's kind of a mid lane jungler and just not really good in lanes anymore. Okay, this is pretty significant on Maokai. Hey, thanks for the sub, appreciate it. This is pretty substantial on Maokai, because how people had been leveling Maokai, I believe, is you would level up his Q first, and then his E second, maybe even his E third. I think it was his E second though, because the number, like the flat percentage damage, I don't think changed. Your base damage, I believe, went up on your E. Let me just look and see. I believe the base went up, but the percentage stayed the same, and the cooldown, I believe, went down. Let me see how it scales. Yeah, so the flat damage went up. Cost went up. Range. Cooldown stayed the same. Yeah, so people may have even leveled this second. Or third and leveled this second. Either way, it wasn't what you rushed. And so what that means is that your damage is down quite a lot across the board. So it starts at 6% instead of 8%, which doesn't sound huge, but that's 25% of your damage, basically, on it. Because your base damage is so low anyways, it doesn't matter that much. But so that's 25% less damage, and this is really going to hurt Jungle Maokai because that's a lot of his early game damage and wave clear comes from those sapling tosses because they're just so efficient and they do so much max damage, especially to kind of those larger high HP targets like the buffs, Gromp, things like that. So I think he'll still be good. I think he'll still be good, but it definitely is going to hurt his wave clear in the jungle particularly. And there might be other junglers that pass him up now. And you might see, like, Gragas is still going to be really good in the jungle. I think Cho can be pretty good. Jarvan is really popular. I think this brings him down to earth. So he's not like as much of a must-pick, must-ban as he was, but he's still going to be a strong pick. Okay. Sion. I don't think this matters. I mean, this is a huge percentage increase, right? So from 2 to 3, that's 50% more HP. But if you really think about it, especially at like Platinum and lower, bonus health per small unit killed is going to be, you know, let's say you kill like 200 in a game. This is going to give you 200 more HP than you would have gotten before. It's like, you know, like 7% more max HP if you have 3,000 by end game. Something like that. If you only have 2,000, if you build more AD or something for some reason, maybe 10% more damage, but it's okay. I mean, it's good. It's a buff. This doesn't address Sion's like core problems, I don't think, that kind of hold him back a lot of time, which is that he's very telegraphed. Just with everything. His ult's very telegraphed. His his Q is telegraphed. His E's pretty good. I think they need to lower the cast time or like the charge time on his Q. And I think they need to make him move faster with his ult. And that would help him out. That would make him more relevant. Because right now there's just too much counterplay. And I mean, I guess with Sion, like I think they've deliberately chosen to design him to where he's really high risk, high reward. So you do quite a bit of damage if you get a full charge on your ultimate, or if you get a full charged up Q and you combo that together with, you know, your other stuff, then you can do quite a bit of damage. So they've tried to make him appeal more to kind of lower elos, or people just don't have the reaction speed, or maybe they don't pick champions with enough movement speed to get away from him. So I think his E can be pretty powerful. Let me just click on this so I don't have to keep going back out to Google. I think he can be pretty powerful in the right circumstances. I just think that if your opponent is paying attention against a lot of comps, he's pretty easy to counterplay. But like his E is really nice. I did play with him on Members Night the other night, which is Members Night tonight. If you want to join, get in on it. It's just $5 a month, less than a quarter a day. It's a lot of fun. The shredding the armor by 20% is definitely relevant, and it does some pretty good damage. I mean, 140 damage for what, 45 mana cost. It's pretty good at level 5. I'm thinking support Sion primarily, but it's a good slow. And that slow can set up for your decimating smash, which is also pretty cheap. It's pretty good top end damage. I mean, he's okay. He's just very telegraphed and easy to outplay if you know what you're looking for a lot of times. So, and he can, you know, the same thing with a lot of bruisers or juggernaut champions. He can be kited very easily. He has a really hard time with Janna. He has a hard time cutting through people that have a lot of healing and shielding, which is what a lot of supports are right now. So this is nice for him, but this is just reinforcing stuff that he's already good at, and it doesn't fix his problems, which are the counterplay opportunities. So like this right here, if you get a full charge from like across the map or something and hit somebody for 1200, like that's nice and everything, but most people are going to see it coming. Like, maybe if they took away his yell, maybe if he just came running in and it didn't make the sound to announce that he was coming in, maybe that would be a good way, so that people actually had to pay attention. If they weren't paying attention, he could actually run up the river and hit somebody. I think that could be cool. Because, I understand why Kled makes a sound, because, you know, he can kind of, like, home in. He comes in a lot faster, and he can curve around walls and stuff like that to come in. And he has, like, a lot more wiggle room where he just, like, automatically charges the person that's close to him. Sion doesn't have that. He just charges in a straight line. And if you don't line it up right, or if they just walk to the side, then you miss. So I think that taking away the noise would actually be a pretty good improvement, too. But as it stands, he's okay. I think he's just going to be a niche pick. He's still going to have a lot of problems. I mean, he's all right. All right. Vi, it's okay, but she's not really that great in this meta. Vi is good when Trinity Force is one of the best damage options, and it's just not right now. Like, tank itemization is really strong, and then critical strike itemization is really strong. Trinity Force is not historically that great into tanks. It's better into squishy champions. And Vi has a hard time getting peeled. Like, basically, she ults, and then that's about it in a team fight. You better kill him when you ult him right now. So, you know, she had her day in the sun earlier this season when Courage of the Colossus was really strong, because then she could just go, like, full damage and not die immediately. But now she's back to pretty much dying immediately if she goes in. Like, Janna counters are really hard. Their Morgana counters are really hard. And just a lot of the shielding and healing champions can stop her burst. So she's all right. She is guaranteed engage, but another thing that really kind of takes away a little bit of her thunder is the new-ish Righteous Glory when they change that around, because that gives all of the tanks guaranteed engage. Basically, like Maokai with Righteous Glory might as well be Vi. Like, they're not getting away from it, because you can just run in and then just, you know, stick to someone with Twisted Advance, and that's it. Or Cho'Gath with Righteous Glory. He's going to get in and chomp you, most likely. So that they took away her one thing that she's really good at, which is guaranteed lockdown engage with that item, and it just kind of makes it to where she doesn't have a purpose anymore because everyone can do that. Everyone can automatically engage right now with her or with Righteous Glory and Sivir and such running around all the time. So, you know, her items just aren't really that great, and her role has been usurped by some itemization changes. So I don't think she's in a great spot right now. She's okay. It's not like it's the end of the world if you play her. This is a nice buff having more ults earlier on, but I still feel like there are just better choices most of the time. On-hit interactions with wards, I don't think this matters that much. Maybe for these specific champions, it's okay. Like, Jax doesn't waste some of his hits on wards. I don't think that's a big deal. Okay, so now they're moving down to the mid lane. Now, some of this stuff is actually going to shake stuff up quite a bit. So Cassio, pretty decent nerf. The E lowers her base damage by about 11.5%. It doesn't look like much, right? Like, it's just going from... well, is it? Hold on, 0.3... yeah. Okay, so it starts off higher at level 1, but then at the very top end, this is the first thing you max typically. At level 9, then it does less. That's curious because they say they don't want people early game non-empowered E spamming, but then they increase the damage by 50% at level 1. I just noticed that. What? Opting for level 1 non-empowered E spam strategy shouldn't automatically win the lane. So that's what they're saying is a problem. And so they changed her damage from the E doing 10 base damage and having a higher ability power ratio to doing 15 base damage and having a higher ability power ratio. What am I missing? It looks like they just buffed the damage at level 1 by 50%, and that's the main thing they're complaining about, is her early game ability to just spam E and win. Let me look and see this. Did they write it down wrong? Okay, if it's poison, it does this. Did they take down the base damage? It doesn't say they took down the base damage. Okay, so they hit the mana, and they're saying that knocking out the mana and the mana growth would stop people from spamming this early because she's not going to have as much mana. And then they compensated by giving her higher base scaling early, but not as much later. Okay, that's a weird way to handle it, but sure. But anyways, at level 9, you're doing 15 less damage, which is about 11.5% at the base. So you do get an extra, 0.05 AP scaling, which means you'd have to have 300 AP to break even on that later in the game. However, Cass typically builds like Tyr, Morellonomicon, Rod of the Ages. All of these things don't have a ton of AP on it. They're okay, but they're not like Deathcap, for example. So it's going to take her a while to get to that 300 AP. And the mana nerf is going to hurt her quite a bit early on. So the Tyr, will make up for some of that, but I think she's going to be a great pick for LCS. I don't think it's going to change that much. It might change a little bit. And I think she's relatively weak at plat and lower. Like, one of the big problems with Cassiopeia is, like, she's almost like an AD carry that you have to kite backwards, but you have to move over and click your E on someone. Even hot casting to, like, move, click, move, click, move, click is really, really hard to do mechanically. Like, I've tried to do that. I've played Cassiopeia. She's fun, but it's really hard to kite backwards with her against a target that is kind of far away. Like, maybe like 300 or 400 range away when you're moving. You have to move very, very quickly. Whereas, like, with AD carries, you can just attack, move, attack, move, attack, move backwards, and just, like, keep your mouse in one spot, basically, and just keep kiting backwards. With Cassiopeia, you have to, like, move, like, smart cast, move, smart cast, move, smart cast, move, smart cast, like that on the screen, rather than just, like, press, move, press A, press, move, press A, press, move, press A, like this, and just keep your mouse in, like, one spot with the AD carry, if that makes any sense. So I think that makes her very, very difficult mechanically to play. And you need to be able to constantly hit your poison so that you get your empowered damage and so you can actually kite back. Because she can't get boots, so she relies very heavily on getting that bonus movement speed when you hit your Qs. And the effect radius is only 75, so it is not a very large effect radius. You have to hit it right on top of them. And it's delayed by like 0.4 seconds. So that's the whole thing about Cassiopeia, is you have to constantly hit these Qs, and you have to be able to attack move with the Twin Fangs. So I think that makes her very, very hard to play, and I think, frankly, a lot of people just can't handle her, so. Powerful in the LCS, not nearly as strong in solo queue. Corki, 3 AD nerf? What? Yeah, that's not his strong early game. Like, okay, he does some auto attack damage. His stronger early game is that, like, he gets those rockets and he gets his Q, and he does mostly magic damage, which is kind of tricky for a lot of people to itemize against early on. So that's kind of Corki's problem, is he creates itemization problems because he can do a ton of magic damage on auto attacks because he can crit, and that does magic. So, like, Corki's problem is, I mean, he's good. I don't think he's too overpowered, but, like, part of what makes him really strong are things like his phosphorus bomb. Like, he's really safe with his Valkyrie, his delivery. This Gatling gun is very strong. It's just he has a lot of spells that do pretty good damage. He has nice range. Like, if they really want to nerf his early game, they should knock his range down from 550 to, like, 525 or something. As it stands, it's not going to matter. He's still a pretty good mid laner. The Fizz buff, and I hate to say this because I played a game with the Fizz yesterday and it was just a nightmare. Like, Fizz is the kind of champion who, if he does get fed, he can really go off. But I think more so than almost any other champion that I've ever seen in League of Legends, he has the potential to just get completely steamrolled in lane. I mean, we're talking like yesterday, and this was a Platinum, like, 2 ranked game. There was a Fizz on my team that went, he had like 18 CS. 18 CS. And the Teemo top lane had like 60. Now, I know it's a tough matchup for Fizz, but I feel like there are a lot of tough matchups for Fizz in lane. Hello. I'm gonna grab some more water here in a second. So I think that Fizz is difficult into a lot of lanes. However, I think this is a pretty good buff to him, because that's going to allow him to level up his W first now. So you don't have to level up your Playful Trickster, because you're going to get a free 2-second CD on it early on, which is going to help you be a lot safer. So this actually does quite a bit of damage. Watch my Orin video if you want to know more about the Fizz. I think I linked it in the patch there. Yeah. But I think that, like, going Death Crown Lichbane on Fizz can be really, really strong next patch. So I don't think he's quite there. I think that he still has a lot of problems in some matchups, but I think he's getting closer. I think he's definitely getting closer to being good. This will let him, like, max his W first, which will give him a nice spike of damage once he gets to level 6 with his ult, and then also once he gets to level 9. Because this does a lot more damage. Like, the W does way more damage than the E. You know, it's got a 1.2 ratio. In addition to the bleed, it's like a 1.6 with a 240. So, I mean, this is all right. But this is really where the damage is in terms of the scaling. So I think that it's nice that they're letting him do that. So I don't think that he's top 5 yet, either top or mid lane. But I think that he's starting to kind of walk back into the conversation in some matchups. I think Echo's a lot better right now. But in terms of, like, if you want a melee assassin who's really mobile and does a ton of damage, I think Echo's probably a better choice. But Fizz is better. And the Fizz is getting better. And the fact that they're nerfing a lot of these top tier ranged champions is going to open up more space for champions like Fizz, for champions like Echo. And the fact that they keep nerfing some of these popular tanks that show up middle, most notably Galio, also helps them out. So they're nerfing the ranged people, they're nerfing the tanks, and so you're just going to have, like, these kind of squishy mages that can't really challenge him as much early, and he just gobbles them up later. Fizz is very, very good into mages that don't have a lot of defense. If he once he starts to get a couple items, if he doesn't fall too far behind in lane. Okay, Galio's another one. Hero's entrance is up to 180 seconds. That's 3 minutes. That's already really hard to land in solo queue a lot of times because people just run out of the way of it. So, I don't know. Like, they're giving it the same cooldown as something like a TF ult, which is much more controlled, much more difficult to avoid in terms of gank pressure. Because Twisted Fate can actually gold card people and run them down and do some damage. Like, Galio, if they run out of his circle, he can, like, flash taunt or something like that, but he just really doesn't have a lot of engage options, whereas someone like Twisted Fate would. So I think giving it, or like a Karthus who just like damages everybody automatically. I think that, I don't know, I feel like that's almost unfair because he's already has problems, you know? I don't know, he's okay. I think that maybe he can still be like a pretty good like niche pick in some circumstances. Like he's good in pro play because they're organized enough to use his abilities well, but in solo queue there are probably better choices. He's alright. LeBlanc. Okay, they're doing more comprehensive work on her is what they say here. They're hurting her wave clear quite a lot with the Shatter Orb on the queue. So that's 25% less damage on her major wave clear, so that's going to hurt her pretty badly in terms of utility. She does still do a ton of damage, and she's very difficult to lock down once she gets ahead, but I think especially in this meta where people are running a lot of tanks and things with lockdown, crowd control, you know, you've got like your Malachi W, and just a variety of other things that like Cho'Gath silence, a Cho'Gath silencer so she can't jump away or something when she goes in. That's really, really bad. So I think there are just a lot of things that make it really tough for LeBlanc right now. So there's not as many targets to blow up because the jungle is almost always going to be tanky. Top lane's typically tanky, and even the supports are tanky half the time. So it only leaves you with like 2 or 3 targets, potential targets on the enemy team, and that makes it a lot harder to get super fed to that unstoppable state. So she's all right. I just don't think she's probably top 5 right now. I mean, if you're like a specialist LeBlanc user, you can still do very, very well with her. But for the general population, I don't think she's going to be that strong. Orianna, so this is what they changed, the buffering cast range. So this, just pretend this is not here. So that's what they reverted at the beginning that I talked about. But the damage is down a pretty decent chunk. I mean, not a ton. Early on, damage is down. Protect, the shield is down a decent chunk. So just kind of giving her a slap on the wrist. I think that she'll still be good. But I don't think she'll be too overwhelming. In solo queue, sometimes you see really good Oriannas, but for the most part, she's not really that impressive in solo queue. She's much better in pro play, where once again, it's highly organized. You can put the ball on someone who's about to engage, you know, set up combos with your team. And she's just a very safe pick, and I think she'll still be that. So if you don't know what the enemy mid lane has, and you just want something that's pretty decent into most things, has good range, has some good utility, has some good, like, defense, like natural defenses to her with the command protect, pretty good wave clear with a dissonance, good combo with her ult, good sustained damage. You know, I think she's still going to be a pretty good pick. Syndra, I think this is pretty rough. I mean, the scaling on her Q is getting knocked down quite a bit. Like, what's 10 into 70? That's like 14% or something. Like 13%. Yeah, so it's basically taking 13% of her sustained damage out. Pretty close. I mean, it's not the base damage on the Q, but it's just the scaling. I mean, her full combo can still do a lot of damage. She just does a lot less sustain. So I think she'll be alright still, but I don't know. She'll be okay. So, like, all of these are just, like, not completely knocking them out of contention, but they're definitely going to be slightly weaker than they were, which kind of balances them out because they're all sort of, like, the top tier people, but it's going to make anyone that's not them a little bit more powerful. Like Echo, I think, is a big one. Echo's already good in a Syndra, and this is definitely going to help him out quite a lot in that matchup. Talia. Now, this is the big one that this nerf actually matters. This might actually knock her out of top 5. 30 extra mana is a really big deal in her queue, because this is something that you spam all the time, and the 30 mana, you know, on 70, that's like 42% more mana cost. So yes, she does rush tier, but she's like usually she'll get Lost Chapter, but she's gonna need a lot of mana here, a lot of mana. So she's almost always gonna have to have blue. She might even have to go like tier Amarillo, something like a Cassiopeia would build. So that's definitely gonna slow down her damage quite a bit. So you'll see her, she'll be all right. She's okay in solo queue, but that mana cost is definitely gonna hurt her pretty big. Okay, coin. I don't think this matters that much. I have played with this for a couple of days. It actually buffs Janna and Rakan because they don't need the mana off a coin. So anyone else that does need the mana, like Sona and Nami, are going to get marginally hurt by this. And those are some of the premier champions for bullying out, potentially bullying out Janna early on. So I think Janna gets stronger, Rakan gets stronger, Morgana gets stronger. She doesn't need the mana. So it hurts a lot of the spam characters early on that really want that mana, and it helps anyone else that's like, you know, just more of a non-spammer, I guess, for lack of vocabulary, where just someone who just is more reliant on either their burst damage or on their scaling. So I think that this is primarily bad news for Sona and Nami. I think they'll still be fine because they rush other mana items really early, Ardent Censer, Redemption, stuff like that. But you just have to be a little bit more careful with your mana management. Okay, Cinderhulk. Doesn't matter. It's 75 more gold. Like they say here, it's like one more camp. You know, like 10 more seconds before you can go back and complete Cinderhulk. So it helps. You know, it helps kind of nerf the tanks a little bit, but that's not really the true problem. They need to take some of the extra health scaling off of Cinderhulk, probably. I don't know. I mean, I think tanks are fine. Like, you want tanks to be viable. I think Cho'Gath is, or not Cho'Gath, Maokai is probably closer in line now. Cho'Gath, they need to just change his chomp to where it's not true damage, or they need to change it to where it doesn't scale off health, or not as much health, or something like that. His ult is really the only major problem. Like, he should not be able to pop Gargoyle and, you know, like one-shot somebody, like literally chomp them for 100% of their health, which I've seen that before. In addition to being like unstoppably tanky and having really good sustained damage and lots of good disruption in fights, like, it's just too much. And the fact that he can just like take any dragon or bear and you're not going to outsmite him. They need to change some stuff about Cho'Gath. I don't think this is enough, but it's fine. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Let me just double check here. I wrote this up yesterday, just now doing the video. Okay. So yeah, that's the patch notes. Let's go ahead and get on to the meta here. We're making pretty good time. We got 30 minutes here. Making pretty good time. Okay, so my meta predictions, I think Enchanter supports are still going to be really strong. Nothing's really changed about them. Coin a little bit hurts them, but it also hurts things like Taric early on, who also likes Coin. So I think that the core of them is Ardent Censer and the plus healing and shielding itemization. That's intact. They are nerfing Ardent Censer on the next patch. I don't think it's a big enough nerf, but you know, I still think they're going to be good. If you're kind of new to the channel, or you haven't really figured out why like Ardent Censer is so good, or like why healing and shielding is so good, watch some of my past patch notes. I'm not going to rehash that here too much. I did go ahead and put some things that I put in the past patch notes. Just check out Ardent Censer. Check out this video from the #1 Korean solo queue player who talks about why Ardent Censer is really good. And a lot of it is just the Enchanter supports have such versatile and powerful build paths between Ardent Censer, Redemption, Mikhail's, and Athene's. They have a lot of good tools, whereas like tanks don't have quite as much. Like Knight's Vow is good, Locket's good, Zeke's Convergence is pretty good, but like they just don't have the synergy because they don't have the plus healing stat. Like that just gives so much extra power and flexibility to Enchanters that it doesn't give to any other class of supports. Like, I really wish they would just make something that was called like support power or something like that. Maybe a fancier name than that. And I'm like, Enchanter supports items that had support power would give you extra healing and shielding, but on like tank champions, it would give you extra CC or something. I don't know. Something like that. They're kind of doing that because they're making the tank items this partnered system. Like, the problem with balancing is they don't want, like, cheap items that are powerful to be played by people that aren't support, because they can completely take over a meta. So if, like, that's why they nerfed Knight's Vow a little bit by taking off 50 health, because some junglers and top laners were starting to build it because it was so good. And they don't want that. They want supports to have... Because the thing about support, you don't get much gold, but you want to feel powerful and impactful. And so they have to design items that are simultaneously, like, very impactful and cheap, but not something that other laners would want, because that could be abused because of their cost effectiveness. So, you know, they want the supports to be able to build Knight's Vow, but they want the tanks to have to build things like, you know, Dead Man's Plate or Thorn Mail or something like that. It's more expensive, but worth the cost in many respects. So that's what they're kind of trying to do with tank items. They're making this partnered system with Zeke's Convergence and Knight's Vow and things like that, where you have to be near someone else, so a solo laner doesn't want it. A jungler typically doesn't want it. But that does allow them to add a lot of extra cost-efficient power and team fighting power to some extent to the tank items. So I like that direction. They need like one more item that's like that to make up for the plus healing and shielding that the AP supports get. Or if they just take away, they could just straight up nerf the plus healing and shielding to some extent, or some of the core items that give a lot of it. Anyways, I think enchanters are still going to be really strong. Okay, so tank support's still pretty good. Just mentioned that, like, Zeke's Convergence is good. You don't see a lot of pro players or high-end players getting this item. I'm not quite sure why. I really like rushing Ardent Censer and Zeke's on some supports, most notably Rakan, because it gives you so much extra power and it has such great synergy. So, you know, this gives you... Oh, this is the wrong item. Zeke's Convergence, not... There we go. Gives you 50% bonus magic damage over 2 seconds. So I'm not sure how much that does, like, on hit. Probably half of it up front, or at least 40% of it up front. The Frostfire doesn't really matter that much. It's this extra 50% damage that your AD carry does. And it has pretty good stats, I mean, to boot. Like, 96% is not amazing, but it's okay, you know. Like, you get armor, magic resist, a little bit of mana, which is okay. It's not a ton of mana, it's alright. And then the 10% cooldown, so... I think it's worth it for that. And the thing is, you get that extra attack speed off of the Ardent Censer, and the extra on-hit, and all this other good stuff. Mostly the attack speed with the bonus damage is just, like, it's a ton. If you've ever used this consistently, which I have, you can just feel the power of how much extra damage they're hitting for, because obviously this scales off of crit as well, I'm pretty sure. So if you crit somebody, you know, for 1,000, then it's going to do 500 bonus magic damage over 2 seconds. So I think that's pretty good. So it's pretty decent itemization. Knight's Vow is pretty good, Locket's good. Talisman's something I haven't been using as much lately, but if you have a bunch of tanks on your team, it can be pretty decent. You know, the kind of champions that can run Ardent plus Zeke's is really, really strong on the AD carry. And, you know, that's like Rakan, Taric, Sejuani, Blitz. I even did that last night on Nautilus, and it was pretty decent. The pure tanks are okay, you know, but they can have problems, like Zeke's, Knight's Vow, Locket. Nautilus can run Ardent Censer. He's not fantastic with it, but he's okay. He does have some AP ratios on his abilities. Plus healing is obviously not great on him. I think AP supports are still in a pretty hard place. Hard engaged Shanks are just a nightmare for AP supports. You know, when you have people running at you with Righteous Glory like Malachi or Cho'Gath or Jarvan running at you or whatever, and you're a Zyra, it's just not a really happy place most of the time. You just can't cut through them, and they can get on you whenever they want. Also, Doran's shield kind of ruins a lot of early harass champions like Zyra, because the enemy AD carry, and plus if they have a heal and a shield, so if they have like a Sona plus they start with a Doran shield against Zyra, you're just not going to be able to kill them in lane most of the time. So the combination of Doran's shield plus the meta that's full of hard engaged tanks Makes it really, really difficult for most AP supports. I do think that Adaptive Helm is also pretty rough, although a lot of people don't buy that item. I do think that one of the better AP supports is probably Vel'Koz. I did play with him, I think it was last week. It might have been the week before that for Members Night. Because he does true damage. So the third stack does true damage, and then your ultimate can actually do full true damage if you procced a deconstruction. Then people are researched to take true damage. So, you know, you can do upwards of, you know, when you start getting some decent AP, you can start approaching like 800 to 1,000 true damage on tanks, which is pretty good. Now, obviously, that's not going to help as much against like 5,000 HP Cho'Gath. Like, it's okay, but it's going to do better than almost anything else. So the fact that he has huge teamfight presence, he has pretty decent poke, and like the true damage utility to cut through tanks is good. So you can go coin on him. I mean, you can go Ardent Censer if you want to. He doesn't have the plus healing. I'm not sure if I tried that or not, but you do have a slow. Like you could go like Stoneborn Pact. Like you could go something like Stoneborn Pact, and then your slow would. Oh, I don't know. That feels a little cute. You probably still have to go Deathfire Touch on him, but I think he's one of the better APs if you want to go that direction. Or Fiddlesticks if you're against squishier team. Fiddlesticks is not as great against tanks either, but you know, a 2.25 second fear is pretty good. And I actually do like going Ardent Censer plus Stoneborn Pact on Fiddle. Because DFT's not that. DFT's like okay on him. Thunderward's okay, but it's not great. And but the healing from Ardent Censer actually does help with his W a little bit. He likes the movement speed, and you have the point click fear that makes it really easy to proc the Stoneborn Pact and the Ardent Censer. So I think that Fiddlesticks and Vel'Koz in different situations, if you want to do an AP support, I think those would probably be the two I'd recommend. Zyra can still be okay if you get really far ahead early, but it's tough if the game goes more than 25 minutes. Okay, so I think tanks are still going to continue to dominate. The Righteous Glory, super strong. You know, this is something that I mentioned kind of in passing when it came out, but the tanks hadn't been buffed yet, so I was like, okay, whatever, they changed Righteous Glory. But then once they buffed the tanks and they changed Righteous Glory, then it became a really good powerhouse item. So they changed a lot about it in 7.12. They reduced the health, but they gave it armor and they gave it cooldown reduction. So, you know, the health that they took away, that's about 266 gold worth of health. Is 100 times 2.66, and they gave it 600 gold worth of armor, which is 30 armor, and they gave it 10% cooldown reduction, which is about 350 gold worth of cooldown reduction. So they basically took away, you know, 266 gold worth of stats, and they gave it something like 900 gold worth of stats. Now, they did take away this passive. Whenever you take damage, you gain it as mana. Whenever you spend mana, you gain a little bit as health. But that was really an anemic passive that was pretty garbage to begin with. So basically, you get 900 more gold of efficiency to take away a silly passive and a little bit of health. And I hadn't seen that before. I'll have to check that out. And there you have it. You have a really, really strong item. So I think that... And it has a much nicer building path too. This Glacial Shroud gives you that armor and cooldown reduction that you want really early. So yeah, I think that helped make tanks a lot stronger. So yeah, Mao and Cho still really crazy. I think Sivir's still really good. So yeah, I do still think that Vayne, Jax, Cho, Cass, Nazir will be pretty strong against tanks. And then Janna, Sona, and Soraka are still going to be really strong. So a lot of this is just exactly what I said last patch. Just if you didn't watch the last patch notes, this is very, very similar meta breakdown with a couple of tweaks, a couple of differences, but I think it's going to be a very similar meta. Lethality champs are still pretty bad. You know, Kha'Zix, Rengar, Kayn, all of these having a hard time because they're not that great against tanks. That's just pretty much all there is to it. I mean, if you go like full AD, you know, full lethality like Jarvan or Wukong, like early on, and you snowball, you can snowball and still get ahead, especially if they don't have a ton of tanks. But I think for a lot of people that can't close out games before 25 minutes, a lot of teams that can't close out games, lethality is going to feel really underwhelming, especially on AD carries. So I think Jhin and like Miss Fortune are having a really hard time right now, especially Jhin. So I think that this, since, you know, because lethality champions are typically very early to mid-game bully type of champions, so like your Misfortune, your Jhin, like old school Varus, Kha'Zix, Rengar, these Kha'Zix is still pretty good. But a lot of these are early game bully champions where you can really leverage the power of Duskblade procs early and like Ghostblade's mobility. Because, you know, shredding 20 armor is all good when someone only has 30 armor, but once some of these tanks start getting like 200 armor, shredding 30 armor is not going to do a ton to help against that. So I think that Misfortune and Jhin are going to struggle, but that means that they're not going to be around to bully out some of these scaling champions. So they're not going to be able to bully out Triss. They're not going to bully Callista, Vayne, Sivir, even Twitch nearly as much. So the only like really bully champions that I think are left are like Draven and Caitlyn. To an extent, Callista can be good early on. So Twitch, in theory, is stronger in this meta, but in actual practice, it's really, really difficult to pull off Twitch because of the people running at you with Righteous Glory. You just don't have an answer to that once you appear, so I think he's okay. Alright, so peeler mids are probably going to be the best. You know, Talia got a pretty big nerf. Azir, Cassiopeia, Syndra are pretty good. Anivia's alright. She didn't get touched. She's still pretty good. Corki and Echo will still be good. Orianna and Malzahar can be good. So, you know, I had thought that things like Fizz, Cass, Cat, Zed, and Talon would be a little bit weaker, but I still think that Talon, Zed, Kassadin are a little bit weaker. Katarina also a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, these are not going to be the strongest on this patch. They'll be okay. Okay, so my top 5 for each role. And remember, I'm going to make a separate video for each one of these where I go into more depth and sort of talk about comparisons and things like that a bit more. But top lane, I think Fiora is probably going to be the top spot because she beats Cho and Mao. Cho and Mao still might be the top spots, and then Fiora is like the third. But I think she's definitely top 3 right now. I think Kled still is super strong. He has wonderful scaling, great engage, great utility, bully early, scaling late. It's usually a good combo. And then J4 is really popular as well. Good utility, good team-wide buffs, great armor shred, great utility, great diversity of build options. Like you can go full damage or you can go the tank build if you want. All of those are good options. Mid lane, I don't think I upgraded the mid lane one because there's no way that's so accurate. I don't think. Corki is here. Nah, I think Echo definitely deserves to be in here. I'm gonna take Talia off of this. Talia can still be pretty good. Oops, not that. Okay. I think that's probably more appropriate. That might be putting Echo a little bit too high, but I think that it's still going to be like Corki, Azir, Echo, Orianna, Syndra. It's just tough because like Azir can be really good, but he can also be a complete turkey if someone's bad with him. You know, so you could put Talia in here instead of Azir if you want. There are a lot of really, really good mid laners. I'd have to think a little bit more on that. But I think that's a pretty good crew to start with. And Galio's like okay, I guess, still middle lane. But there are quite a few viable things there. And it's AP and does a lot of sustained damage. It's probably going to be pretty good in middle lane. Jungle, I still think it's going to be Maokai, Zac, Cho, J4, Gragas. I still think Maokai is probably going to be number 1 even after the changes. It could be Zac or Cho, though. I think these 3 are definitely... I don't know. Like, Gragas and J4 are really good, too. It just depends. All of these are going to be good. Sejuani, I think, is decidedly a slight step behind the rest, but she's still alright. ADs, I think that Triss is honestly the best AD carry right now. She's just very, very safe. She scales really well with Enchanters. Scales really well with Ardent Sensor. Ton of damage, ton of range, ton of utility. Like, she basically has 2 escapes, one her actual jump and the other one her ult to knock people back. Great tower sieging, great team fight. Pretty good, just one-on-one. Very good with the Energizer build. You know, Static Shiv. rapid fire cannon build. So I think she's number one. Kallista's also pretty good. She doesn't have critical strike, but she's pretty good at tanks. She's pretty good at kiting. She's great with Rakan. She's really good with Ardent Sensor. So I think Callista is potentially pretty good. Sivir's another one that's really strong right now. Excellent wave clear, excellent engage if you have 2 or 3 tanks on your team. Really good scaling because your bounces can crit. Vayne's another one for solo queue that I think can be really strong. Great at breaking tanks. Pretty lackluster early game, but with Doran's shield and, you know, a Nami or a Sona helping you get through the laning phase, Vayne could be extremely strong later on because she can crush squishies with her crit build, not Bork. But with her crit build, she can crush squishies, win fights, and then she also has the true damage to help her get through tanks. So I think she's very good and very hard to deal with if she gets ahead. Draven's another one that is very strong early on. He doesn't have the mobility to get around, to get away from some of the tanks, though. If people get on him and his stand aside doesn't work, then he can get killed. But he does just have a massive amount of damage. If you get ahead early, you snowball so hard as Draven. So you do have to catch a lot of the axes and position really well to make him work. But I think that he can be quite strong in the right circumstances. And then Caitlyn, like, if it was Diamond Plus, Caitlyn would definitely be in the top 5, but I think Platinum and lower, people just don't execute her combos right. Like, they don't use the traps correctly. They don't know the full combo. Like, someone steps on a trap, you headshot, net back, you know, auto attack for another headshot, and then Q, hit them. That's like a lot of their health gone. People don't know how to do that a lot of times at Platinum and lower. People just sit there with no traps and just auto attack with her, and that makes her a lot weaker than other picks, but depending on how good the Kate is, she could definitely be top 5. She's definitely a top 3 in pro play. She's probably a top 2 in pro play still in 7.16. Jinx is a strange, kind of a strange duck. She can be extremely powerful if you have a good peeler support. So if you have a Janna who's really strong, maybe a Nami, something like that. Anyone that can protect Jinx, just let her, like, fire rockets, she's gonna crush people. So I think that Jinx is really strong. She just has to have the right kind of comp and the right kind of protection to make it work. Okay, let's go ahead and get onto the support tier list. Let me go grab just a drink of water, just 30 seconds. I know it kind of sucks in the middle of the video, but just 30 seconds. I thought I had a full glass, and I guess I drank it beforehand. So give me 30 seconds real quick. I'll be right back, and we'll get into the support stuff. Looks good. Sorry about that. I'll put the timestamps in there. If people want to skip through that, I gotta have some water. Whew. Okay. Alright, so let's talk about this support tier list here. Alright, so number 1, Janna, and I think she has her own tier at this point. She's so good. Like, you have to pick or ban her every game, I think. And not that much has changed in the last few patches about Janna. I've been saying that she's really good for about 10 patches now. But the major thing that's changed is people have figured it out. So that means that you not only pick her because she's strong and you want to play her, but you need to pick her so the enemy doesn't play her. So it's to the point where you have to defensively pick her. She's that good. She's just very, very good with Ardent Sensor. She's very good with Coin. And because of her kit and how safe she can play, people are actually running gold per 10 runes on her now. In some matchups, to help her get Ardent Sensor, you know, 300 gold faster at like 12 or 13 minutes to buff up the AD carry, which is really powerful. So she's just too strong. I mean, she has virtually no bad matchups. She's okay. Like, there are some things that can kind of pressure her early, but she still is going to make it through to the late game. She has very good scaling with the 80 on her shield. Her shield scales really well. Itemization's very good on her. She's just the best. I mean, and she's pretty good against Rakan. Like, Sona's pretty good against her. Nami's alright against her. But she's very good with tanks. She's very good against tanks. She's very good scaling with champions like Tristana. Very good with Ardent Censer. Like, the only time when she's not good is if your team fails in champion select, basically. So if your team picks a comp that doesn't scale and they have a really high scaling comp, you're not going to be able to do a lot about that because you don't have engage. So you can't force them to fight and you can't close out games early. So, you know, if your AD carry picks Jhin and their AD carry picks Tristana, and they get Sona, and, you know, your mid laner picks, I don't know, something really like Zed or something like that, and then their AD carry picks like an Orianna, or I don't know, just something like that where they're going to outscale you as the game goes on, then Janna's not good. But other than that, she's really, really good. So I think she's a must pick, must ban. Rakan's another champion that I think gained on this patch because he doesn't need to spam his abilities. Like, the unique aspects of Rakan that I really like, and he's probably either my most played or second most played champion lately. A popular combo I'll do is I'll ban Janna and then play Rakan, because I think I'm better at playing Rakan than a lot of other people. But Janna, I do play Janna really well, but I don't want them to play Janna because Janna can still be really impactful even if you're not the greatest Janna player in the world. But Rakan's really good with Ardent Censer as well. He has really nice AP ratios. He has a 0.7 on his Q. He has a 0.9 on his shield. Then he effectively has a 1.6 on his Battle Dance. So he has really, really good AP ratio. So he loves Ardent Censer. You know, he has 3 different things that his passive scales off of the plus healing and shielding. His Q scales off of that, and so does his E. So I think he's really good with Ardent Censer, and he has the option of going Zeke's because he likes the tankiness. He likes to get in there. He likes to engage. And if you have Zeke's plus Ardent Censer, like I mentioned before, that's a really, really powerful combination of abilities. He also has the ability, if you want, you can just go, you know, Redemption or Locket. He's very, very versatile build path with Rakan. And unlike other tanks that engage, he can actually engage and escape. So he can go in with his ult W and then escape with his E and get back out. So he's a lot safer than other tanks. And he can use his engage to escape very easily. So something like Alistar can only headbutt into fights a lot of times, right? Whereas Rakan can jump over walls. Like, you can do some cute stuff with Alistar, like ward over a wall and then like headbutt to raptors or something to get away. But it's like very situational and tricky sometimes to do that. Whereas Rakan can just like dash through a wall and get away, like no questions asked, you know? So I think that makes Rakan particularly powerful because he's safer than other engaged champions. He scales with plus healing and shielding. He can use Ardent Censer and Zeke's comfortably if he wants to. He can go AP runes or he can go tank runes. Heck, I've even gone the gold runes on him one time to rush Ardent Censer. So he's very versatile. So I don't think he's quite as powerful as Janna is, but I think he's more versatile. And I think he's safer to let through the ban process because people are less likely to pick him. They might pick him, but there are counters to him as well. Like Morgana's extremely good against him. Thresh is pretty good against him. Janna's good against him. So there are more counter picks to him than there are to Janna, but he's also more flexible and harder to play, which is a good thing. Okay. Sona's another one that I think is very strong right now. Very good into Janna, but also just pretty good in general. And I was pounding the table on Sona like 3 or 4 patches ago. Like, she's going to be so strong, so overpowered. And that's sort of true. Like, Janna is kind of stealing her spotlight. Rakan's really good too. The thing about Janna is, or Sona, I was getting distracted by some of these banners over here. The thing about Sona, she's not nearly as safe. She doesn't have a lot of escapes. She's pretty slow. You have to get a lot closer. Like, her aura is only 400 when you want to shield people or give them your Q buff. Whereas, like, Janna's shield radius is, like, 800. And, like, Rakan's jump radius is probably about 400. But she has to play a lot closer. Now, she can bully out early, but you have to remember that once they get, like a BF sword or a bilged water or whatever item they're going to get, it makes it a lot harder to trade. The thing too is when you face other enchanter supports, especially if the enemy gets door and shield, then you just basically can't harass early, and that's been a hallmark of Sona play, is really early aggression, and you just can't do that if you're against like Janna and they have a Tristana that has a door and shield or something. You're just not going to be able to harass through that because door and shield is so strong. So you lose your early game power, but you do scale extremely well late game. I mean, she basically has this heal heals you and one other person, so that's a 0.5. Then each person that you hit with a shield is another 0.3 scaling. So if you hit 3 people with your shield in a fight, then that's going to be 1.4 scaling. So that's really, really strong scaling on her heal. Then, of course, her Q also empowers everybody to do damage, and you do some more damage and all that. So she's really good, particularly with Athene's Unholy Grail. So if you go something like Ardent Sense or Athene's, you have a really strong engine of power behind you. So she has really good synergy with some very powerful utility items. And, of course, she has her ultimate that's great lockdown team fight ability on a relatively short cooldown once you get to level 3 especially. So, and the thing that's different from her with some of the other utility champions is the cooldown on this gets so low. It gets to 6 seconds here, then your ultimate naturally gives you 25 base cooldown, and then if you have 40% on top of that, then you can get this cooldown down to like 3 seconds or so, like 2.5 or 3 seconds, where you can just keep spamming your heal. Whereas like Janna is always going to have somewhere around between like 7 to 10 seconds on her shield a lot of time. It's base cooldown of 10, and then you get the cooldown reduction and such. So you're going to be able to get off, probably 2 times as many Ws as you would the shield. And this actually shields everybody and can give your entire team the Ardent Sensor buff, whereas Janna can only comfortably give it to one person most of the time unless you ult or use a redemption. So, not as safe. Better wombo combo. Better early game. Not quite as good as Janna, but still good. Nami's another one that I like quite a lot in some matchups. She has the best early game aggression of anyone else that I've mentioned so far. Because if you land a bubble and a wave, and then if you bring Ignite, that's quite a lot of power. And what she brings to the table is she can empower someone to stick to targets. So this makes her very, very good with Vayne. Because Vayne wants to tumble around, and she already has increased movement speed toward targets, but now she can actually slow them down while she does that extra damage. And it's got a 0.6 ratio on it, pretty much. So pretty good scaling. And then her AP ratio on her heal can be anywhere from a 1.5 to or a 1.3 rather to a 1.1, depending on how you bounce the heal around. I talk about Nami. I've talked about this in my past, I think in the Nami guide, how that works, but she scales very, very well with AP. So if you get like Ardent Sensor into Redemption into Athene's Unholy Grail, it's a very powerful trinity of items for her. So got some good crowd control if you can land it with your bubble, especially against champions that don't have very good escapes. Excellent trading with her W. Good sort of stickiness with her E. This also helps tanks stick to target. So when Cho'Gath's trying to run in there and really stick to somebody so he can chomp him here in a bit, put a Tide Collar on him, that'll help him out. And then of course the wave is excellent sort of stickiness as well, and a disruption and potential disengage if you need for it to work that way. So I think all in all, she's really strong. I particularly like her with Vayne. She's a great babysitter against other tough lanes early on. So good with Vayne, Tristana, pretty good with Twitch. She has several champions she's good with. I mean, she's even pretty good with someone like Jhin, because then you have the early game kill pressure with your Q. So you can maybe try to close out the game before 25 minutes. So I think she's pretty good. Not quite as powerful as the other ones that I mentioned so far, but in the right matchup, I think she can be good. Okay, Morgana is a newcomer to the top of the list that people probably have not really... Well, people have been asking me to play Morg, and they're probably like, why are you all of a sudden playing Morg right now? But there's a lot of stuff that's just recently changed that's made her quite good. So let's go ahead and look at her really quick. And I think a lot of it, at least the way I've started building her and the way other people can build her now, makes her strong. So it's all about, I think, going Stoneborn Pact and then Ardent Censer on her, which is something like historically people would go things like, you know, Thunderlords into like Frost Queens or something, or into Eye of the Watchers, and then get your Zhonya's Hourglass and stuff like that. And I really think that that build is kind of outdated. So what kind of the new hotness is that I've kind of toyed around with, and I think I've seen some other people doing it too, is you go Stoneborn Pact, because you can't trigger Thunderlords early on with her W anymore, because they changed the way that works. What Stoneborn allows you to do is when you hit someone with a Q binding, it's going to root them for 3 seconds. If anyone on your team attacks that person, you have Ardent Censer, they all get the Ardent Censer attack speed buff. So they're all going to get that huge buff. So once you bind somebody, that can allow your entire team to very easily get that buff. And she loves all the Ardent Censer stuff. She loves the AP. She loves the move speed, so you can stick to people with your ult. She likes the mana. She likes everything. She even doesn't mind the plus healing and shielding, because your shield is really, really powerful. So that helps out too. So that's number one, is the new itemization path, which is you go coin, Oasis. That's going to give you a ton of money. You don't really need the mana, so it doesn't matter if they nerf the mana on it. You have innate sustain with your passive. So that helps you stay in lane a bit more. So, coin, Oasis, Ardent Censer. And we're now, and she pushes pretty well early on too. Just drop a minimum total damage. You can just drop a W and it will just, you know, push waves decently. The W is still kind of worthless. I wish they would change this ability around, but it's okay for pushing waves early. And the Black Shield is one of her main attractions. So point click, 800 range, just like Janna. It's got a longer cooldown though, so you got to be a little bit more careful with it. But it doesn't allow any crowd control. So this is huge against tanks, because one thing about tanks is usually they rely on crowd control to stick to people, because they don't have enough damage to burst them down. And then secondly, because they don't have a lot of damage and they can't break this shield very easily. And so if you break the Black Shield, then you can crowd control her again. But if you can't break it, then you know, the crowd control is not going to stick. And it's a pretty big shield if you level it up. I mean, 350 with a 0.7 is really nice, especially with plus healing and shielding. Once you get this up, you throw this on a Tristana or a Twitch or something like that in a fight, it makes it really, really difficult to deal with. And so this is very good against Rakan, because it stops people from getting charmed by Rakan. It's very good against Thresh, stops hooks, stops blitz hooks. So all of that's always been there, but the fact that Thresh and Rakan are becoming much more popular as counters to other enchanters makes her really good, because she's an enchanter that can run Ardent Censer, but at the same time she has counters to hook champions. So Sona doesn't have that, and Janna doesn't have that. So some of the answers people are starting to come up with for enchanters, like mainly the hard engage, especially the hook champions, she counters those pretty hard. She also has decent engage. You know, a 3-second bind is obnoxious, especially on an 11-second cooldown. You can get that down to like 7 seconds or so. That's really, really strong way to start a fight. Pretty good peel too. And it scales really well with AP. So that's pretty good. And then her ultimate is pretty low cooldown, and it's a pretty good peeling tool. It slows people by a decent amount and then stuns them afterwards. So pretty good peel. I would use it that way. I wouldn't try to flash in and start fights with it. I would just, you start the fight with your Q, and then you let other people fight, and then when someone dives, you Black Shield, and you can Soul Shackle the tank and hold them in place. or your AD carry just beats him down. Also, because it's on such a low cooldown, you can actually go for Zeke's if you want to. I did this last night on stream. I went Ardent Sensor Zeke's, kind of like I do on Rakan. And that gives your AD carry even more firepower to blow up the tank that's trying to dive him. So she just has a lot of tools in her kit that makes her pretty good against tanks, and particularly good against crowd control heavy engaged tanks. So you just have to be careful because she doesn't have escapes, you know, like a lot of other champions. So if you get caught out, you're probably going to die. You could consider going Swiftness boots instead of Moby boots if you want to, but Mobies are pretty good for roaming. It's up to you, but I think on some champions that don't have a lot of escapes, like Sona, like Morgana, I think that Swiftness boots can help you compensate a little bit for that. So I think that's particularly what makes her good, is she has very good matchups against Rakan, Thresh, Blitz, and she still has some pretty decent game against other champions out there. So I think that skyrocketed her up in the standings quite a bit. Lulu's another one that I think is starting to kind of make a comeback as another sort of steroid user for Tristana when Janna's banned. I wouldn't really pick Lulu most of the time if Janna's not banned, but since Janna is becoming banned in a lot of games, Lulu does give you another steroid. So she gives you the extra attack speed and move speed. This will help you or help your AD carry kite around tanks better, and it'll give them that extra attack speed. So polymorph is not great against tanks because you're just not going to kill them while they are polymorphed. So historically, Lulu's been really good against assassins because you can polymorph the assassin and you can wild growth people. But Whimsy is great to put on tanks to help them start a fight, and it's good to put on your own AD carry so that you can kite around during fights with extra attack speed, which obviously scales really well with Ardent Sensor and, you know, things like Tristana's bonus attack speed that she gets off of her Q. And then the extra damage on picks is actually pretty nice too. You know, especially with the 0.5 ratio. So if you get like 200 AP or something in a game, if you get Ardent Sensor and you have some runes, and you know, maybe eventually you get like a Athene's Unholy Grail or something like that, then you could do an extra 30 damage. So 140 extra damage on hit when someone's getting just, you know, a ton of extra attack speed is really strong. So I think that's part of why Lulu's coming back. She doesn't have as much wave clear as she used to. She's not great in a Doran's meta or a Doran's shield kind of meta because she can't pressure early. She does not have a great matchup into Sona and Nami because they heal and she doesn't, so they can outbully her early. But she is a decent pick into Janna. She's not amazing, but she's okay because Janna can't pressure you early on, so she can't take advantage of the fact you don't have a heal. And she's pretty good into other tanks because... Oh, and the wild growth also, it not only is good at protecting your AD carry, but it's also good to put on your tank. So it's good to put on like a Cho'Gath or a Maokai or just anyone else who's diving in, because it provides this extra little bit of slow in addition to the health. So, and it knocks people up. So it has some good synergy with things like Yasuo as well. So I think she's all right. That polymorph is brutal in early fights. They're just like small scale skirmishes, you know, like Tristana jumps in on your Vayne and they polymorph the Vayne. It makes it really hard to win. But yeah, and especially because a lot of champions don't want to be getting Mikhail's Crucible right now. You can Black Shield a polymorph, but you have to be really quick on your fingers to get it. It can be done though. So she's alright. I think she's making a comeback for that reason, because Janna's going to be banned and she has some really nice steroids that can boost up champions like Tristana and help people kite away from tanks. Okay, I think that Soraka's okay. Like, the problem with Soraka is one of itemization primarily. She does heal for a lot, but at the same time, the introduction of the Grievous Wounds on Thornmail hurt her a lot, because if your AD carry ever hits a tank, basically, that has Thornmail, then that's going to hurt her. Also, the prevalence of Ignite. So many supports are taking Ignite these days automatically that they're not going out of their way to take it, and that's really good against Soraka. Executioners is something that is always an option, and a lot of mid laners are running Morellonomicon, especially because they're hurting the mana cost now. on some of these mid laners, they're basically being forced to get Morello and Omicron. So those 3 items are very popular. Morello, Thornmail, Executioner to a lesser extent, but it's still there as an easy counter if people want it, and a lot of people are taking Ignite. So I think all 4 of those things make it a really, really dangerous time to be Soraka. Also, the fact that tanks can just run at you with Righteous Glory and kill you a lot of times because you don't have any crowd control or disengage or escapes. All you've got to like Q them and try to run away or silence them. Just decent, but I don't know. It just feels really dangerous. Like, she is very, very good with tanks. So, you know, if you can land, like, if you can get them to just not get any anti-healing stuff on their team and you just keep healing your tanks, then yeah, she's going to be really good. But a lot of times that's pretty optimistic. I think that's a pretty optimistic view for Platinum. I mean, maybe at Bronze and Silver, people won't get the debuff. They won't get any kind of anti-healing, but certainly once you start getting into Gold and Platinum and things like that, it gets a little bit tougher. So she's all right, but she's very, very dependent on what your enemies do. Do they buy that item or do they not? And I don't really want to put my fate in enemies' hands. Like, you can heal through it, but, you know, it's cutting your numbers in half. It's really pretty brutal. Whereas someone like Lulu, Janna, Morgana, Rakan, all these people more heavily rely on shields. And so the Grievous Wounds don't really affect them as much. Sona does get affected by Grievous Wounds, but like half of her effectiveness of her W is shielding. So even she gets around it a little bit. All right, Blitzcrank. Everybody knows Blitzcrank. You land the hooks, you can just really gain a lot of elo, feel very powerful. But if you don't land the hooks, then you just don't have anything else going for you. It's either hook or not. His whole kit is predicated on you landing hooks. So he's a little too one-dimensional for me, but he is very good against Soraka, Lulu, Nami, Sona, Janna, Rakan. Like, he's pretty good against most of these champions. So I think he can be powerful. He's just pretty one-dimensional. Braum is okay. I never really find a lot of success with him. I know people like him as a peeler tank. He is very good at chain stunning a lot of people in team fights. He doesn't provide a lot of pressure early. He can't itemize into Ardent Sensor. But he does have some pretty good team fight presence, especially if you have a lot of auto-attacking champions on your team. So he's okay. He's an okay peeler tank. I mean, he does have some good synergy. Like, his shield is good at blocking like Twitch ultimates, Misfortune ultimates. But it's not going to stop something like a Cho'Gath from just running up and chomping your AD carry. So, you know, he does have some crowd control, but, you know, he's also somewhat limited in crowd control at the same time. Okay, Thresh is another one. If you're really good with Thresh, you can make him work in almost any meta. He can't really get Ardent Sensor. If he lands hooks, he can be really good. There are plenty of champions that counter him really hard. Morgana is very good against him. Nami's alright against him. Sona's okay. Alistar's becoming more popular, even though I don't have him ranked as highly as other people might. He's becoming more popular, and he's very good into Thresh. So I think there are a lot of champions that are like pretty good into Thresh. So you're risking a lot. Like, it's pretty decent probability you're going to miss some hooks, you're going to miss some flays, you're going to mess some stuff up. So I don't know. He's high risk. Like, I guess he's high risk, high reward is how I would classify him. And I would rather have low risk, high reward type of champions. So he's all right. If you're a Thresh specialist, he can be really good, but I wouldn't recommend him to most people unless you have a ton of games on him. Taric is another one that has really fallen from my graces quite a bit. The problem with Taric is he doesn't have a lot of escapes, he doesn't have a lot of range, and all of his moves are very telegraphed. Or a lot of them are. So he does have a lot of raw power with his Q. A lot of times you're only going to get it to level 2, though. If you chain a bunch of your abilities together, you might be able to get it higher. But it just takes forever to charge, and you're just not going to get it charged in team fights. It's very rare to get it up to 5 charges. You can do it, but a lot of times you're going to be sitting there on 3 charges. 2 or 3 charges. Because if you cast it itself and then auto-attack twice, you get a couple of charges, then you can like Bastion and auto-attack a couple more times and get some more charges. So, you know, you'll probably get between 2 to 4 charges a lot of the times. So it's okay. I mean, his scaling is just a little wacky. You know, he wants max health, he wants AP, he wants plus healing, he wants armor. So he's just got kind of like this mess of scaling. His Dazzle is still really easy to outplay most of the time. And it still is really easy to outplay his ultimate. You know, you have 2.5 seconds to say, oh crap, Taric's ulting, let's disengage. So he can be powerful. It just allows too much counterplay from enemies, I feel like. And he just doesn't have a lot of escapes. If a fight goes south or if your team's really far behind, you're going to die a lot as Taric because you have no dashes. There's like no way to get away. You don't have any speed boosts. You have no dashes. They're just going to run you down and kill you a lot of the time. So his raw power can be strong if people just sit there and clump up and just like punch each other. But if people are actually trying to counterplay his abilities, then they can typically do it. All right, Tahm Kench is another one. I moved him up a little bit because he does have a very specific niche, whereas like if you have a weak link on your team, he can protect him. So like one game that sticks out to me recently where I played Tahm Kench, I knew we were going to have this Ashe was probably going to underperform. First of all, because she's playing Ashe, but because I looked at her OP.GG in the pregame, I saw she had virtually no Ashe games and she wasn't an ADC main. So I was like, okay, this is going to be rough. But then the other 3 people on the team were all playing champions they had a lot of experience with that were really good matchups in the other lanes. And so I didn't want to dodge. And so I was like, well, what can I do? I was like, Tahm Kench. Because I can just babysit her. Anytime she's going to get caught or die, I can just eat her and run away. And so he's just like the ultimate, you know, single target protection. You can always eat people and carry them away. And you do have some utility. You know, you can go redemption locket, that kind of stuff on him if you want. If your jungler's on the ball, you can actually use your ultimate to rotate around the map and make some cool plays. So he's okay. I have him up that high because he has a very specific niche that other champions just can't do. So if you need that, if you need the hardcore babysitter, like this person's probably going to feed, I've just got to stop that. Tahm Kench is your solution. All right. Nautilus, I moved up a little bit. Pretty good engage support. I would probably rather have Rakan unless he's banned. But Nautilus is still pretty good. He has the point click ultimate. They just lowered it by 20 seconds, I think last patch. So that's good. He can actually use Ardent Sensor. I have used Ardent Sensor on him before. It's a little goofy. It's a little bit on the goofy side, but he does have decent AP ratios. I mean, you can get up to, you know, like a 0.6 or so. Yeah, I mean, you can get up to like a 0.6 on his E, which is all right. This has a 0.75. His ult has a 0.8. So he has pretty decent ratios as far as AP goes. He does have a self-shield. So that helps him out a little bit. I mean, the 17% shield is probably like a 300 shield in the mid to late game. So getting an extra 10% on that plus healing and shielding can be pretty good. An extra 30, 40 shield, something like that. And of course, the move speed is good. So, I mean, you're mostly getting the Ardent Sensor to help out your AD carry. I don't know if I would recommend rushing that on Nautilus, but I think if your AD carry is really ahead, that it is an option that you can do. So he does have AP ratios, unlike someone like Braum or Leona that have like almost literally no AP ratios. He does have something, so it's not a completely wasted stat. Then he can also use Zeke's really well. He wants the cooldown reduction. He likes the mana. He likes the armor. And he can hold people in place while the Zeke's convergence is going off and your AD carry is just clobbering them. So I did this on stream yesterday, 8-14, the 8-14 stream. And it actually worked out pretty good. I rushed Zeke's into Ardent Sensor, and then I think at the very end I got like Redemption. So you have to be very careful. You're not going to be that tanky if you get that build. So you have to kind of hang out on the outskirts of the fight, but it is an option that you can do. He does have a lot of CC, and he does have some synergies with some decent items out there. Alistar is another one that really kind of confuses me why he's so popular. I mean, in pro play, the point-click engage is good. I would have to think it's because Rakan is banned most of the time, but what? Magic damage per tick. Okay, this is really kind of weird coding here, but you know, he does have a heal in lane. He does have AP ratios. Like, you could go Ardent Sensor. I don't think a lot of people do. You could go Zeke's. I don't think a lot of people do. He's just a pretty good early to mid-game bully, really. I mean, you get free engage. You get to dive towers. The damage reduction is not that high. It's okay. I just feel like if I want that kind of engage, I'm either going to run Rakan or Nautilus. But he still has some decent options. He's all right. He is good with Kalista. Vel'Koz, I talked about him earlier. I think that he's pretty powerful with his true damage. Zyra's another champion where it's like, she's okay. She has a lot of power early on. If you go coin, then it will give you enough gold to eventually complete some of your big ticket items like Leandri's Void Staff. But I think a lot of times they're probably better options. But she is still one of the premier if you want like level 1 to 5 kill pressure. Very level 1 to 6, I guess, kill pressure. She can be really good. Fiddlesticks, talked about him. He could be good. Karma, you know, Karma's okay. She's kind of in this weird spot. A lot of times people would pick Karma because she had very strong early game pressure. And with the introduction of Doran's Shield and then the new Doran's Shield and then Nami, Sona, Soraka, Janna, all these other support champions, Enchanter supports, I think that she's just really fallen off. You know, her shield is not nearly as big as the other ones as it used to be. It's only 170, which is kind of pathetic unless you overcast it. They nerfed the overcast shield quite a lot. The Q spam is still pretty good early, but it gets mitigated by the ways that I talked about. Her crowd control is really lackluster. She's okay. I mean, you would think she'd be really good in a tank meta because she can speed everyone in with Inspire, like Mantra Inspire. And the fact that no one's using that in pro play really red flags her to me, because she would be like one of the first people that I would look to if I was a coach or a player, like trying to figure out, well, who's good with tanks? What kind of support is good with tanks? I would think Karma, because she's great with team fights and she's great at initiating as a team with her mantra E. So the fact that she's not seeing a lot of play means that she's in a really rough spot. And that's why, is because she lost her early game and her scaling's just not as good as other supports. Gragas is alright. You know, the big nerf was to his ult. I believe they added on 20 seconds. Is this up to date? Or am I just making that up? Oh, it was 100. Okay. Yes, they made it 120. So it's still pretty decent, you know. He can be okay. It's just like his ult is a little unreliable. He has some pretty decent damage. I don't know. Like, you can't really use Drunken Rage in lane that much. Like, he's okay. He's okay. He just has kind of long cooldowns for laning. I mean, it just doesn't really do that much other than just, like, throw barrels for a little bit of wave clear. He's alright. If you're really good at landing, like, clutch, explosive casts, I think he can be good. I just feel like I'd rather run, you know, Rakan or Nautilus, I think would just be much better, like, guaranteed engage champions. And then Trundle seems like he should be really good in this meta. Like, he's very good at breaking tanks. He has a good Q reset. But he just doesn't do a lot. He just, like, I've played him a couple of times. He just kind of runs around in lane and just doesn't do a lot. He has, like, no ranged abilities. His pillar, the thing that really, if you're wondering, well, Trundle support was definitely a thing last season. Why doesn't he get played more this season? And the reason is they nerfed his pillar time. Like, quite a bit, because you used to be able to have pillar up almost all the time, and that's like his major contribution to fights a lot of times, is being able to block people off and add on that this really nasty slow field. So if you look at his history here, I remember these icons. When did they nerf him? They nerfed him, there we go, 6.17. So they gave him an extra 3 seconds. Max pillar time. So yes, that's really rough, because he used to almost permanently have pillar up, because I think it stays up for like 5 seconds. If you got max CDR, you know, you could get it down to like 6 or 7 seconds. They nerfed his base regen. Like, they nerfed him 3 or 4 times last season. No longer affects turrets. They did add that back in. They increased the mana cost. Increased the cooldown on Subjugate by quite a lot. So yeah, so in Season 6, they definitely nerfed him pretty substantially. I think they gave him back. Yeah, Chomp can get turrets now. So I don't know. Like, it seems like he should be better in this meta, but he's just not. He just doesn't contribute enough early game. He doesn't scale. Like, it's really an Ardent Sensor meta. If they nerf Ardent Sensor and the plus healing and shielding a lot, he'd probably be a lot better, but he just gets crushed by any enchanter most of the time. So he's okay, but I think there are probably better options. All right, and that's going to be it that I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about all the tier 4, the tier 5, and such. You know, I do think that champions like Bard, Leona, Brand, Zillion, like, these can be good champions. I just feel like, you know, they just don't have as much raw power. Most of these champions somewhere in here in the top 20 are going to be stronger than the champions down here. So they're going to do almost what these champions do. They're just going to do it better most of the time. And frankly, a lot of the stuff in the tier 1 and the tier 2 are going to do what the stuff in tier 3 does, but they're just going to do it a little bit better. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to stay tuned. I am going to try to release an AD carry video very soon, and then I'll see if I can do some of the other roles too, like mid lane, jungle, top. So that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.